Most people believe power is loud. They think the strongest person is the one who talks the most, argues the hardest, or dominates every conversation. They think confidence looks like proving yourself, explaining yourself, defending your name. But that is not what toxic people fear. Toxic people fear silence. Because silence means you are not emotionally available to be controlled. Silence means you are no longer dancing to their manipulation. Silence means their usual weapons, guilt, gaslighting, drama, and chaos, suddenly stop working. A toxic person does not want peace. They want reaction. They want you angry so they can play victim. They want you confused so they can rewrite reality. They want you explaining so they can twist your words. They want you chasing so they can feel powerful. But when you go quiet, when you stop reacting, when you stop trying to be understood, something strange happens. They begin to feel exposed. Your calm becomes a mirror that reflects their insecurity. Your silence forces them to hear their own thoughts. Your emotional distance makes them realize they are no longer in control. And control is everything to a toxic person. They don't care if you love them. They don't care if you hate them. They only care that you respond. So when you stop feeding them attention, explanations, and emotional energy, you don't just hurt their ego, you threaten their identity. Because a manipulator without a target has no power. This is why the most dangerous person is not the loudest, but the one who can walk away without a word. Today, we are going to uncover 20 silent behaviors that quietly dismantle toxic people without arguments, without revenge, and without drama. These are not aggressive moves. They are psychological shifts. And once you master them, toxic people won't just dislike you, they will fear you. Before we dive in, I want to share something personal. I get many messages from people who feel surrounded by fake friends, constant drama, or emotional chaos. And they just want a place to be real. That's why I created a Patreon community, a private space where you can open up, share what you're going through, and get my personal insights. It's also where you can request specific video topics. If there's something you're struggling with that you want me to break down here on the channel. If you're serious about growth, peace, and self-awareness, you'll fit right in. The link is below. Now, let's begin. Here are things fake people always say and the hidden truth behind each one. 1. You walk away without drama. This is one of the most powerful behaviors on this entire list and also one of the rarest. Most people announce their exit. They explain, they argue, they make speeches. They want the other person to understand how hard they are. Toxic people are counting on this because drama is their final opportunity to regain control. When you walk away without drama, you deny them that last emotional feast. No shouting, no long messages, no closure conversation that turns into manipulation. You simply stop showing up. And that silence hits harder than any confrontation ever could. Toxic people are wired to escalate conflict. They poke, they provoke, they disrespect you just enough to pull a reaction, but not enough to be exposed. They want you emotional. They want you explaining your pain. They want you saying, after everything I did for you, because once you do, the power shifts back to them, they can twist your words, invalidate your feelings, rewrite history, paint themselves as the victim. But when you walk away calmly, something breaks in their mental framework. There is no argument to win, no narrative to control, no emotions to manipulate, just absence. And absence is terrifying to someone who needs control. Walking away without drama sends a silent message far more threatening than anger ever could. You no longer matter enough to disturb my peace. That sentence, unspoken, destroys toxic people because they don't fear conflict. They thrive in it. What they fear is irrelevance. They fear being dismissed quietly, without resistance, without begging, without explanation. When you walk away without drama, you force them to sit alone with unanswered questions. Why didn't they fight for me? Why didn't they argue back? Why weren't they emotional? Did I lose control? And those questions haunt them. Example, imagine this situation. You've been dealing with someone who constantly disrespects you. Subtle insults, crossed boundaries, passive-aggressive comments. Every time you bring it up, they deny it, joke about it, or accuse you of being too sensitive. One day, they do it again. All you would have reacted. All you would have said, why do you always talk to me like that? I don't deserve this. I've been patient with you. And the argument would begin. They would smirk, deflect, gaslight, and turn it into your problem. But this time, you do something different. You pause. You don't raise your voice. You don't explain. You don't threaten to leave. You simply say nothing. Later, you stop replying as quickly. You stop initiating conversations. You stop showing up emotionally. And eventually, you stop showing up at all. No announcement, no dramatic exit speech, no, this is why I'm leaving message. Just distance. At first, they are confused. Then irritated. Then suddenly, they start reaching out, are you okay? Why are you acting different? Did I do something? Notice the shift. The person who never cared about your feelings is now desperate for clarity. But you don't rush to explain, because explaining would reopen the door. Your silence forces them to confront something they hate more than being hated, being dismissed. They replay conversations in their head. They question their control. They wonder if you finally saw through them. And that uncertainty eats at them. Walking away without drama is not weakness. It requires emotional discipline most people don't have. It means resisting the urge to be understood by someone who has already proven they don't listen. It means choosing peace over the satisfaction of winning an argument. Stoic philosophy teaches this clearly. Do not waste energy trying to correct someone who benefits from misunderstanding you. You don't owe toxic people explanations. You don't owe them closure. You don't owe them emotional access. Your calm exit is enough. And here's the truth. Most people miss when you walk away quietly. Toxic people don't remember your anger. They remember your absence. They remember the moment they lost access to you. They remember realizing they no longer mattered enough to provoke a reaction. That realization stays with them far longer than any argument ever would. Silence, distance, and self-control are not passive moves. They are psychological dominance without aggression. And once a toxic person realizes you can walk away without drama, they understand something very important: you cannot be controlled. 2. You don't explain yourself. This is one of the most unsettling behaviors to a toxic person because it removes their favorite weapon, confusion. Toxic people do not want clarity. They want conversation. They want back and forth. They want you justifying, correcting, defending, and redefending yourself. Why? Because every explanation you give is something they can twist. When you explain yourself, you hand them pieces of your story. They pick those pieces apart. They reframe them. They use them to build a version of reality where you are wrong and they are right. But when you stop explaining, you shut down the game. You don't defend your motives. You don't justify your choices. You don't clarify your intentions. You simply decide and move. And that drives toxic people crazy because they feel entitled to access your thoughts. They feel entitled to your emotional labor. They believe you owe them a narrative they can pick apart. When you refuse, they feel powerless, not angry, they're not offended, powerless. And that is what they truly fear. Toxic people often disguise control as curiosity. They'll say, I just want to understand. Explain yourself. Why are you acting like this? But they are not seeking understanding. They are seeking leverage. They want you talking so they can find weaknesses, discover doubts, collect emotional data, then later use it against you. Every extra word you speak becomes ammunition. When you don't explain yourself, you become unreadable, and an unreadable person cannot be manipulated. Example, imagine you decide to stop spending time with someone who constantly drains you. They message you, why are you avoiding me? All you would have replied, and I'm just busy, and I feel like you don't respect my time, and sometimes you make me feel uncomfortable, and I don't want to argue. And just like that, you would be pulled into a debate. They would say, if you're overreacting. You misunderstood me. You're too sensitive. That's not what happened. Now you're explaining again, defending again, proving your feelings are valid. You've handed them control. But this time you reply with something simple: I'm choosing to step back. That's it. No emotional backstory, no justification, no debate. They push harder. Why? What did I do? You don't bite. I've made my decision. Suddenly, they feel uneasy. They can't argue with your feelings because you didn't reveal any. They can't twist your story because you didn't give one. They can only face the truth: they lost access, and not knowing why drives them insane. This is why not explaining yourself is so powerful. It creates a psychological vacuum. Toxic people are used to controlling narratives. They are used to rewriting reality. They are used to pulling you back in with arguments. But when you offer no story, no emotion, no justification, there is nothing to manipulate. Stoicism teaches this beautifully: you don't need to defend what is aligned with your values. You are allowed to make choices without writing an essay about them. You are allowed to live without giving someone the satisfaction of understanding you. You are allowed to be misunderstood by people who benefit from misunderstanding you. And when you don't explain yourself, the toxic people feel something they hate more than anger: is they feel excluded. Excluded from your inner world, excluded from your reasoning, excluded from your future. That quiet boundary says, I do not owe you access to me, and that is why they fear you. 3. You keep your boundaries firm. Nothing exposes a toxic person faster than a calm, unmovable boundary. Not anger, not confrontation, not even walking away, the boundary. Because boundaries reveal who is used to having power over you. Toxic people do not react strongly to insults. They do not react strongly to silence. They react strongly when they can no longer take from you your time, your energy, your attention, your emotional labor, your forgiveness. They have built their entire identity around access to your patience, access to your empathy, access to your self-doubt. So when you quietly lock that door, they panic. Most people think boundaries are about telling someone off. They are not. Boundaries are about what you do when someone crosses the line. Anyone can say, I don't like that. Very few people can say, I won't allow that. And even fewer can enforce it without emotion. That is where your power lives. Toxic people test boundaries the same way burglars test doors. A little push, a small violation, a joke, a harmless comment, a minor disrespect. They are watching. Not for what you say, but for what you tolerate. If you laugh it off, if you explain, if you stay silent but stay present, they go further every time because you just taught them something dangerous, that you can be crossed. This is why firm boundaries terrify toxic people. Not because they are harsh, but because they are predictable. When you are emotionally reactive, they can manipulate you. When you are inconsistent, they can wear you down. But when your boundaries are calm and unchanging, they lose their favorite tool: hope. Hope that they can push you one more inch. Hope that guilt will make you fold. Hope that confusion will make you doubt yourself. You take that hope away, and they feel powerless. The boundary trap: the toxic people often disguise boundary violations as, I was just joking. You're too sensitive. I didn't mean it like that. You're reading into it. These phrases are not misunderstandings. They are tests. They want to see if you will apologize for being hurt, explain yourself, or back down. When you do, you signal something: my boundaries are negotiable. And a negotiable boundary is not a boundary at all. It is an invitation. Example: imagine this. There is someone in your life who constantly makes subtle, disrespectful comments. Not obvious enough to call out easily, but sharp enough to sting. Little jokes about your intelligence, your goals, your appearance, your choices. Every time you feel it, you hesitate: maybe I'm overthinking. They didn't mean it. It's not worth a fight. So you stay silent. They notice. So they push a little harder next time. This time, instead of reacting emotionally, you say calmly, I don't appreciate comments like that. No anger and no drama, just a statement. They laugh, relax. I was joking. Here is where most people fail. They start explaining, I just felt disrespected because, and the manipulation begins. Instead, you simply say, I'm not comfortable with it. That's it. Next time they do it again, you don't argue. You don't raise your voice. You create distance, shorter replies, less engagement, less access. And suddenly, something shifts. They start acting nicer. They start asking what's wrong. They start trying to pull you back in because they realize something, their usual tricks stopped working. They can't poke you anymore. They can't use humor as a weapon. They can't cross your line without consequences. And consequences are what toxic people fear most. Why this works, boundaries do not scare healthy people. They respect them. They adjust. Toxic people don't. They see boundaries as rejection, and rejection triggers their deepest insecurity, that they are not in control. When you calmly enforce your limits, you are telling them, you don't get to decide how I'm treated. That message cuts deeper than any insult. Stoic power, the Stoics believed you should never try to control other people, only yourself. A boundary is not about changing someone. It is about deciding what you will allow in your space. You don't say, you must treat me better. You say, I will not stay where I am treated badly. That difference changes everything. One begs for respect. The other expects it. Toxic people can sense that shift, and they hate it. The final truth, when your boundaries are firm, something important happens. You become emotionally expensive. You are no longer cheap to disrespect, no longer easy to use, no longer safe to mistreat. And people who rely on taking advantage of others always fear those they cannot afford. That is where your calm, quiet, unwavering boundaries make toxic people uncomfortable, not because you are aggressive, but because you are no longer available for manipulation. And that makes you powerful. For you keep your life private. Keeping your life private is one of the most underestimated forms of power. Not loud power, not dominant power, invisible power. Toxic people are obsessed with information. They don't just want to know what you're doing. They want to know how you feel about it, what you're planning, what you're afraid of, what you hope for, where you're weak. Because information is how they control. Every detail you give them becomes a lever. Every confession becomes a handle they can pull. Every dream becomes something they can undermine. So when you keep your life private, you don't just become mysterious, you become untouchable. Most people overshare because they think it builds connection. Toxic people overshare to collect data. They listen not to understand, but to use. They remember what hurts you. They remember what you want. They remember where you feel insecure. And later, when you least expect it, they weaponize it. Your privacy blocks that entire strategy. Why privacy scares toxic people? A toxic person wants a psychological map of you. They want to know what makes you emotional, what makes you hesitate, what makes you doubt yourself, what you're working toward, what you're afraid to lose. Because once they have that map, they can guide you right into their control. When you stop revealing these things, they lose their advantage. They can't predict you. They can't sabotage you. They can't hit your weak spots. And unpredictability makes manipulators feel unsafe. The illusion of innocent curiosity, toxic people often disguise intrusion as interest. They'll say, I just care about you. Why don't you tell me things anymore? You've changed. What they really mean is, I no longer have access to your inner world, and that terrifies them. Because if they don't know what you're thinking, they can't control where you're going. Example, imagine you are working on something important. A new business, a new career move, a personal transformation. You used to talk about it. You shared your hopes, your fears, your doubts, and every time you did, the same person would subtly discourage you, point out risks, make you second guess, joke about it. Not enough to be obvious, just enough to plant doubt. So you stop sharing. You don't announce your plans. You don't explain your strategy. You don't seek validation. You simply work. Weeks pass. They notice something is different. You seem distant. What are you up to? Why don't you tell me anything anymore? You smile and say that I'm just busy. That's all. Now they feel uncomfortable because they can't interfere. They can't sabotage. They can't plant seeds of doubt. They have no access to your mind. And that is where your real power lives. Silence creates psychological distance. When you stop oversharing, toxic people lose emotional leverage. They don't know what to criticize, what to undermine, what to use against you. They feel excluded, and exclusion is painful for people who need to control. Stoic wisdom: the Stoics believe that what is private is protected, your plans, your struggles, your growth. They do not need an audience, especially not one that benefits from seeing you fail. Privacy is not secrecy. It is self-respect. It is choosing to grow without interference. The final truth: when you keep your life private, toxic people feel something deeply unsettling. They are no longer inside your story. They don't know what chapter you're on. They don't know where you're headed. They don't know how to reach you emotionally. And when someone loses access to your inner world, they lose power over you. That is where your silence, your mystery, and your privacy make toxic people uncomfortable, because they can no longer touch what they cannot see. 5. You don't need revenge. Revenge is what most people think makes them powerful. They imagine that if they strike back, they reclaim control. If they humiliate, expose, or punish, they finally win. But toxic people know better. They understand that anger, grudges, and revenge are predictable, and predictable behavior can be manipulated. When you act out of revenge, you are giving them exactly what they want: emotion, attention, and energy. Every plot, every insult, every calculated move is just more fuel for their psychological game. It shows that they still matter to you. It shows that they still control your thoughts and your actions. True power, the kind that makes toxic people fear you, does not come from revenge. It comes from indifference. It comes from silence. It comes from moving on without looking back. Why? Revenge is weakness in disguise. Revenge assumes that the other person deserves your energy. It assumes they are capable of change. It assumes that the world cares about the balance of your justice. And toxic people exploit all three assumptions. If you plot retaliation, they watch your patterns and anticipate your moves. If you expose them publicly, they turn it into a story where you appear unstable or irrational. If you act impulsively, they twist it to claim victimhood. In short, revenge keeps you inside their world. It keeps them at the center of your attention. It feeds the very drama they thrive on. The true power of letting go: when you don't seek revenge, you remove yourself from their battlefield. You do not answer their provocations. You do not react to their insults. You do not chase closure, justice, or recognition. Instead, you focus on your life, your goals, and your peace. This creates a type of power toxic people cannot comprehend. They are used to people being predictable, angry, defensive, or reactive. They rely on that predictability to feel superior. But a person who refuses revenge, doesn't overreact, doesn't compete for attention, doesn't feed their toxicity, becomes a force of nature they cannot influence. And that is terrifying to a manipulator. Example: imagine someone has betrayed you. Perhaps they gossiped about you at work. Maybe they stole credit for your achievements. Maybe they humiliated you in front of others. Or you might have sent a furious message, confronted them publicly, retaliated in kind. Then the cycle would begin. They would defend themselves, twist the story, then argue until you are exhausted. They would feel vindicated because they pulled a reaction out of you. But this time, you do something different. You do nothing. No confrontation, no public display, no whisper campaign. Instead, you continue with your work. You continue with your life. You continue improving, growing, and moving forward. They begin to notice you no longer react to their provocations. Your success continues despite their interference. Your calm and distance highlight their irrelevance. And slowly they begin to panic. They realize they no longer matter. They realize they have no control over your life. They realize you are untouchable. And that is far more devastating than any act of revenge. Psychology behind not seeking revenge. Revenge is rooted in ego. It is an attempt to restore your image, your status, or your sense of justice. But toxic people do not respect justice. They do not play fair. They do not care about your image. By refusing revenge, you remove their leverage entirely. You deny them emotional reactions. You deny them attention. You deny them the satisfaction of being the center of your energy. You are no longer a participant in their game. You are the observer, the one in control, the one they cannot manipulate. Stoic lesson. The Stoics taught that external events do not harm us, only our judgments about them do. Revenge is the judgment that someone else has wronged you in a way that must be fixed. True wisdom says the only wrong that matters is the one you allow to disturb your peace. By refusing revenge, you protect your inner world. You maintain calm while others spiral in their own drama. You assert control not through retaliation, but through detachment and composure. The final truth: not seeking revenge is not passivity. It is not weakness. It is unshakable strength. It is saying without words, your actions do not dictate my peace. Your toxicity cannot control me. I am above your games. And toxic people hate it. They are used to people being angry, bitter, or obsessed. When you refuse to participate, when you walk away quietly, when you continue building your life without them, they do not know how to respond. They cannot predict you. They cannot manipulate you. They cannot touch you. And that is the ultimate form of silent power. You don't need revenge. Your life, your calm, and your forward motion are revenge enough. Toxic people feel it. They fear it. And they cannot stop thinking about it because power does not scream. It does not strike. It simply exists, quietly, immovable, untouchable, and free. 6. You improve quietly. Most people believe that success must be announced. They believe that growth only counts if it is visible. They think the world must know every victory, every skill gained, every achievement unlocked. Toxic people love this because when you announce your progress, you are giving them access to judge, access to belittle, access to compare, access to manipulate. They will minimize your achievements. They will twist your progress into arrogance. They will try to steal credit. They will inject doubt into your journey. And all the while, they feed off your need for validation. True power comes from quiet improvement. You focus on yourself. You work on your skills. You build your mind, body, career, and life in silence. You don't need applause. You don't need followers. You don't need approval. You let your results speak for themselves. Toxic people cannot stand this. They rely on distraction and noise. They rely on emotional chaos. They rely on others seeking their attention. When you improve quietly, you deny them all of that. You are becoming more than they can influence, and they can feel it. Why quiet improvement terrifies toxic people? Toxic people fear invisible growth more than any attack. A loud comeback can be argued with. A public victory can be undermined. An angry reaction can be provoked. But quiet improvement is untouchable. Because no matter how hard they try, they cannot slow you down. They cannot twist your progress. They cannot manipulate the effort you put in. And slowly they realize something deeply uncomfortable: you are moving forward without them. Your life, your success, and your transformation do not depend on their approval. You are becoming a force they cannot control. Example: imagine you are learning a new skill, say, starting a business, mastering a craft, or improving your health. In the past, you might have broadcast your journey, posting updates on social media, telling people about your plans, sharing milestones, hoping for praise. A toxic person would latch on to this immediately. That's not going to work. You're overestimating yourself. Why are you trying so hard? They will plant doubt, criticize, or guilt you into slowing down. This time you do something different. You keep your progress private. You study, you practice, you work, you execute. No announcements, no explanations, no need for recognition. Weeks, months, or years later, your results become visible, suddenly undeniable. And when the toxic person notices, it's too late. You have already grown beyond their influence. You have already leveled up in ways they cannot touch. You have already proven yourself without seeking their approval. And that realization that they were irrelevant to your growth terrifies them. The power of silence in growth, improving quietly sends a silent message that is louder than words. I do not need your permission, validation, or approval. I am building my life on my own terms. Toxic people hate this. They are used to having emotional leverage. They are used to controlling the narrative. They are used to seeing people flounder while they manipulate. When you improve silently, they are forced to watch without interference. They feel powerless. They feel irrelevant, and that discomfort lingers. Stoic perspective, Stoicism teaches that external praise is meaningless. The only thing that matters is your own progress and virtue. By improving quietly, you are applying this principle in the most effective way. You strengthen yourself without showing off. You build mastery without attention. You achieve results without needing acknowledgement. This makes you unshakable, unmanipulable, untouchable. Toxic people crave chaos. They feed on attention. They rely on distraction. Quiet improvement denies them all three. The final truth, quiet improvement is one of the deadliest behaviors against toxic people because they cannot predict it. They cannot manipulate it. They cannot stop it. And eventually, when your success and transformation reveal themselves naturally, they are left with only one thought: I had no control over this. I had no influence. They grew without me. That realization that they are irrelevant to your growth terrifies them more than any argument, insult, or confrontation ever could. True power is not in proving someone wrong. True power is growing silently, unstoppable and untouchable, and toxic people fear it more than anything else. 7. You don't over-explain your decisions. Over-explaining is one of the most common ways people give away their power. Toxic people rely on it. They rely on the fact that most people feel guilty for saying no. They rely on the fact that most people feel the need to justify every choice. They rely on the fact that most people desperately want approval, understanding, or validation. Every explanation you give them is like handing them a key. A key to twist your words. A key to manipulate your intentions. A key to find weakness in your resolve. When you over-explain your decisions, you are giving toxic people everything they need to control you. The moment you start justifying, you are already in their game. Why over-explaining hurts you, or when you explain why you chose one thing over another, you are doing several things at once. You admit that your decision requires permission, you create space for argument, you signal that your choice is negotiable, you reveal the reasoning that can be used against you. Toxic people thrive in this environment. They hear your reasoning and immediately start analyzing, where can I poke a hole? How can I make them doubt themselves? How can I make this choice seem foolish? Every over-explanation is like handing them a blueprint to dismantle your confidence. The power of a simple statement: when you do not over-explain, your decisions become immovable facts. You do not argue, you do not justify, you do not negotiate, you simply decide and you communicate it concisely. I cannot attend. This is what I am doing. I have chosen differently. No more words, no justifications, no defending your existence. That simplicity terrifies toxic people because they are used to being able to influence or manipulate or debate. When you remove the conversation, you remove their control. Example: imagine a coworker constantly tries to pull you into office politics. They pressure you to join gossip. They try to convince you to take sides in a meaningless feud. They ask, why don't you just speak up? All you might have said: I don't want to be involved because it's unprofessional and I don't like conflict. And besides, I think it's unfair. And the next thing you know, they are dissecting every sentence, twisting your words, and drawing you back into the chaos. This time, you respond differently: I'm not getting involved. No further explanation. The conversation ends. The toxic person is left frustrated. Why? Because they expected engagement. They expected you to justify your choice. By refusing to explain, you take away their opportunity to manipulate your reasoning. Psychological impact. Not over-explaining has a profound psychological effect on toxic people. It makes them feel excluded. It makes them feel powerless. It forces them to confront your autonomy. They are used to people bending, apologizing, or debating endlessly. When you refuse to justify, they realize you are independent and untouchable. Silence combined with decisiveness communicates more authority than hours of arguing ever could. Why silence is stronger than argument? The toxic people want drama. They want confusion. They want your energy. Over-explaining is an open invitation. When you remove the explanations, there is no drama. There is no chaos. There is no ammunition. Your decision stands on its own. Your authority is inherent, not conditional. And that is terrifying to someone who thrives on conditional control. Stoic perspective. The Stoics teach that you should focus only on what is within your control, your decisions, your actions, your boundaries. You cannot control how others react. You cannot control how they interpret you. You cannot control their opinions. By over-explaining, you attempt to control what is outside your power. By not over-explaining, you focus only on what is yours, your choice, your life, your energy. That is mastery. The final truth. When you refuse to over-explain your decisions, the toxic people realize something frightening. You are unpredictable. You are independent. You are unavailable for manipulation. And they hate it because most people will bend, negotiate, and justify themselves endlessly. But not you. You stand firm in your choices, calmly, silently, and without apology. And that is a form of power they cannot challenge. It does not scream. It does not provoke. It simply exists, unmovable, untouchable, and respected without words. Toxic people fear someone who does not need to justify themselves, because once you stop explaining, you stop giving them control. And that is the ultimate silent dominance. 8. You're not afraid to be alone. Most people fear being alone. They fear silence. They fear isolation. They fear the emptiness that comes when no one is watching, judging, or interacting. Toxic people thrive on this fear. They know that when you are afraid to be alone, they can control you. They can manipulate you. They can demand attention, validation, and energy. Because they know you will give it just to avoid the discomfort of solitude. When you are not afraid to be alone, you remove one of their most powerful tools. You stop needing them. You stop depending on them. You stop letting them decide your worth. And that terrifies toxic people. The power of solitude, being comfortable alone, is not loneliness. It is self-sufficiency. It is freedom. It is clarity. Toxic people are used to chaos, noise, and dependency. They want you reacting, seeking approval, or clinging. They want you filling their void. When you are alone and content, they realize they cannot provoke you. They cannot control your decisions. They cannot distract you from your goals. They cannot fill your mind with doubt. Alone, you are untouchable. Why toxic people fear independent solitude? Toxic people feed on access to your emotions, access to your attention, access to your time, access to your energy. They know that most people will compromise themselves just to maintain connection. When you show that you are not afraid of being alone, they feel something deeply uncomfortable. They don't need me. They cannot understand it. They cannot control it. And worst of all, they cannot make you dependent on them. And when toxic people lose the ability to influence, they start to fear. Example, imagine a friend or partner who constantly demands your attention. They text constantly. They call at odd hours. They guilt trip you if you spend time with others. They make subtle threats. If you really cared about me, you wouldn't be doing that. Most people panic in this situation. They reply immediately. They explain why they were busy. They apologize for being unavailable. They overextend themselves. The toxic person thrives on this. But now imagine you respond differently. You do not panic. You do not apologize unnecessarily. You continue your day, your work, your growth. When you are truly content being alone, focused on your life, your mind, your goals, your absence speaks louder than words ever could. Suddenly, the toxic person feels uneasy. They might text again. They might guilt trip harder. They might attempt manipulation. But you are unshakable. Your peace is not dependent on them. Your happiness is not dictated by their approval. Your attention is not a resource for them to exploit, and that is terrifying. The psychology behind it, being afraid of being alone creates dependency, then dependency creates control. Toxic people do not want you to be free. They do not want you to be independent. They do not want you to realize that their approval is optional. When you embrace solitude, you signal that your life is your own. You do not need to explain yourself. You do not need to justify your choices. You do not need to appease their insecurities. And toxic people hate losing control. The more content and confident you are alone, the more powerless they feel. Stoic wisdom, Stoicism teaches that we should cultivate inner self-sufficiency. The Stoics understood that relying on external validation is a weakness. True freedom comes from being comfortable in your own presence. When you are alone and at peace, nothing outside of you can shake your mind. No insult, no manipulation, no drama. Toxic people cannot handle this because they are addicted to external influence. They need to push buttons to feel powerful. They cannot fathom someone who does not need them. Practical ways to master being alone: create mental independence. Your thoughts, moods, and energy belong to you. Do not hand them to anyone. Focus on your growth, use alone time to improve skills, work on projects, and build resilience. Enjoy your own company, do things that make you happy without expecting validation. Set boundaries, do not over-explain why you need space. Just take it. Reflect silently, spend time thinking and journaling without needing input from others. The more you practice this, the less anyone can manipulate or control you. The final truth: being unafraid of being alone sends a silent but terrifying message to toxic people: you are not necessary for my peace, my happiness, or my growth. Your opinion does not define me. Your access does not matter. Toxic people fear this more than anger. They fear it more than confrontation. Because when someone is content alone, they are truly free. They cannot be controlled. They cannot be provoked. They cannot be cornered. And that freedom, a calm, quiet, self-sufficient freedom, is the ultimate silent power. 9. You control your tone. Your tone is one of the most powerful tools you have, and toxic people know it. They listen for emotion, volume, and agitation. They feed on it. They manipulate it. They provoke it. Because most people do not control their tone. Most people react instinctively. They yell. They panic. They raise their voices. They argue desperately. Every change in volume, every fluctuation in emotion, is a doorway to manipulation. A doorway a toxic person will step through without hesitation. But when you control your tone, you remove that doorway. You remove their ability to predict, provoke, and exploit you. Your voice becomes calm, steady, and unshakable, no matter the chaos around you. Why tone is more powerful than words? Words can be debated. Arguments can be twisted. Explanations can be challenged. But tone communicates intent, composure, and authority in a way that words cannot. A toxic person can lie about your actions. They can misinterpret your words. They can distort your reasoning. But your tone reveals truth. Calm tone equals unshakable confidence. Steady tone equals emotional independence. Neutral tone equals unmovable boundaries. Toxic people react to how you say things more than what you say, because they are not just attacking ideas. They are attacking emotion. They are testing whether they can get under your skin. They are gauging whether they can control your reaction. And when your tone cannot be manipulated, they feel powerless. Example: imagine a situation where someone tries to provoke you at work. They make a condescending comment, "Oh, I see you're handling that task yourself. Hope you know what you're doing." Most people would react instantly, raising their voice in defense, explaining why they are competent, saying something sarcastic back. And immediately, the toxic person smiles. They see your reaction. They see the disruption in your composure. They know you can be rattled. Now imagine a different response. You look at them calmly and say, "Thanks. I've got it under control." Your voice is steady. Your tone is even. There is no agitation, no sarcasm, no need for justification. The toxic person freezes. They expected chaos. They expected reaction. They expected fuel for their game. Instead, all they get is control they cannot reach. The subtle art of tone control. Controlling your tone is not about suppressing emotion. It's about mastering it. It's about choosing how to respond, not reacting instinctively. It's about maintaining composure even when others try to provoke you. Some key principles: pause before speaking, give yourself a moment to respond thoughtfully. Lower your volume, people react more strongly to raised voices than calm ones. Use even pacing, a steady rhythm communicates confidence. Avoid emotional inflection, do not let irritation or frustration leak into your words. Speak effectually, not emotionally, stick to facts, not feelings, when asserting boundaries. The combination of these principles makes your presence unshakable. Why toxic people fear controlled tone? Toxic people rely on chaos and emotional reaction. They push buttons to make you defensive. They provoke to create drama. They manipulate by exploiting emotional cues. A controlled tone removes their leverage. They can't make you angry. They can't make you guilty. They can't bait you into over-explaining or apologizing. Suddenly, the toxic person is faced with something unfamiliar: stability. And stability is uncomfortable for someone who feeds on unpredictability. Stoic perspective: the Stoics teach that we should focus only on what is within our control. You cannot control others. You cannot control how they speak. You cannot control their manipulation. But you can control your tone. You can control your reaction. You can control your composure. Your tone becomes a shield, a signal, and a weapon. Shield protects you from manipulation. Signal shows you are calm and unshakable. Weapon silently communicates dominance without aggression. The final truth: controlling your tone is one of the quietest, most effective ways to instill fear in toxic people. They are used to chaos, instability, and predictable reactions. When you respond calmly, consistently, and with authority, you remove their power. They cannot twist your words. They cannot provoke a reaction. They cannot manipulate your energy. And because they cannot control you, they feel something toxic people hate more than any confrontation: powerlessness. A calm, steady tone communicates one truth without ever saying it aloud: I am in control of myself. Your attempts to provoke me fail. You cannot manipulate me. Toxic people fear this kind of quiet mastery because it exposes the limits of their influence, and once they recognize it, they avoid it, respect it, or fear it, but they can never dominate it. 10. You choose who has access. One of the most underestimated forms of power is control over access to your time, your energy, your attention, your emotional world. Toxic people are addicted to access. They want into your thoughts, your plans, your feelings, your life. The more access they have, the more leverage they gain. Most people give access freely. They reply immediately. They explain themselves. They share their plans, their struggles, their emotions, then toxic people thrive on it. When you choose who has access and how much, you are quietly reclaiming power. You are building boundaries that cannot be crossed. You are protecting your peace and your freedom. And toxic people fear it. Why access matters: access is a form of currency. The more someone can reach you, the more influence they have over you. The more influence they have, the more they can manipulate, provoke, or guilt you. Toxic people rely on this. They push boundaries because they know you will respond. They provoke because they know you will justify yourself. They drain energy because you give it away. When you control access, you cut off their leverage. You decide who sees your life. You decide who gets your time. You decide who can speak into your mind and heart. And toxic people cannot handle not being included. The psychological impact: controlling access triggers fear in toxic people because it introduces uncertainty. They are used to constant attention, constant influence, constant emotional fuel. When you limit or deny access, they panic. Why aren't they replying? Why don't they share details anymore? Why are they no longer available to manipulate? They realize something dangerous: that I am no longer in control. I am no longer relevant. I cannot predict or manipulate them. And that fear is more powerful than any argument or confrontation. Example: imagine a friend, a family member, or coworker who constantly drains your energy. They call at all hours. They demand immediate responses. They expect your attention for their drama. All you might have answered instantly, explained why you are busy, tried to appease them, and the cycle continues. Now imagine doing something different. You pause before replying. You reply only when it is convenient for you. You decide how much of yourself to share. You protect your time and energy. The toxic person notices immediately. They are no longer dictating your schedule. They are no longer in control. They are no longer guaranteed access to your mind or life. And suddenly they feel powerless. Access as a form of silent power: by choosing who has access, you communicate invisible authority. I decide who I allow into my life. I decide what is worth my energy. You are no longer a reactive participant in their drama. You are the gatekeeper. You are the one with control over what enters your world. Toxic people hate gatekeepers. They hate people who cannot be manipulated, bargained with, or guilted. They hate being denied influence. Your quiet choice creates fear because it signals one thing loud and clear: I am untouchable unless I allow you in. Stoic perspective: the Stoics teach that your energy is sacred. External events, opinions, or manipulations cannot harm you, only your reaction to them can. By controlling access, you protect the space where your mind, heart, and life are safe from unnecessary disturbance. You do not need to explain your choices. You do not need to justify who is included or excluded. You simply choose, and that choice is more powerful than any argument or confrontation. Practical ways to control access: set communication boundaries, decide when, how, and with whom you engage. Protect your time: your schedule is sacred. Prioritize people and activities that align with your values. Limit oversharing: only reveal what others need to know or what benefits you. Be selective with trust: not everyone deserves access to your emotions, goals, or secrets. Enforce consequences: if someone violates your access rules, calmly remove or restrict their access. The more consistent you are, the more toxic people realize they do not get to choose your boundaries, they do not get to dictate your focus, they do not get to control your attention. And that realization terrifies them. The final truth: choosing who has access is silent power in its purest form. You do not need drama. You do not need confrontation. You do not need revenge. You simply decide who matters and who doesn't. And toxic people notice immediately. They are no longer guaranteed influence. They are no longer in control. They are no longer central to your world. That is what makes them fear you. Because for toxic people, fear comes not from anger or dominance, but from irrelevance. And when you are the one deciding access, you make them irrelevant by choice. You've learned it now. Power is not always loud. Power does not need to shout, argue, or attack. The most dangerous and commanding force is often silent, invisible, and unshakable. Toxic people rely on chaos, confusion, and access. They feed on emotion, over-explanation, and compliance. They thrive when you react, defend, justify, or chase them. But when you do the opposite, when you walk away calmly, improve quietly, protect your energy, and control your inner world, you step into a type of power that they cannot measure, manipulate, or challenge. This power is not about being aggressive. It is not about proving them wrong. It is about becoming untouchable. You've learned to keep your boundaries firm, protect your privacy, refuse revenge, improve silently, control your tone, decide who has access, and much more. Every behavior you adopt is a brick in the fortress that separates your peace from their chaos. Every silent action is a signal that you are no longer available for manipulation, guilt, or drama. And toxic people notice. They feel it. They fear it. Because the truth is simple: when you stop reacting to toxicity, when you stop giving it energy, and when you rise above it quietly, you become more powerful than they could ever imagine. This is the art of silent strength, the mastery of self, the freedom from influence. And the beauty of it is, it requires no confrontation, no anger, and no explanation. The quieter you become, the more your power speaks. The less they are able to reach you, the more they fear you. The more self-contained and independent you are, the more untouchable you become. So carry this with you. Your life, your peace, your energy, they are yours to protect. Your choices, your growth, your boundaries, they are yours to command. Your silence, your calm, your quiet mastery, that is your greatest weapon. Toxic people may try, may push, may provoke, but they will never truly touch you if you remain firm, silent, and untouchable. Power does not need to shout. It does not need to prove itself. It simply exists. And when you live this way, you are unstoppable.